He thought he was untouchable. He thought his badge gave him power. But tonight he learns what real authority looks like. The night air was thick and still, the kind that clung to your skin long after the sun had gone down. It was late, too late really, for anyone to be out unless they had a good reason. Danielle Carter had one. She had just finished visiting her mother in Birmingham, Alabama, and was making the long drive back home. But first, she needed gas. Pulling into a small, nearly empty gas station, she parked next to Pump 4 and exhaled, rolling her shoulders. The drive had been long and her back ached. She rubbed her temples before stepping out of the car. The only other vehicle in sight was a beat-up pickup truck parked near the convenience store. Its driver was nowhere to be seen. She swiped her card, inserted the nozzle, and let the gas flow. The streetlights overhead flickered every few seconds, casting odd, broken shadows across the pavement. A neon open sign buzzed faintly from the store window, barely visible through the tinted glass. Danielle wasn't nervous. Not yet. She had been in situations that called for caution before. Undercover work, high-risk arrests, tense interrogations. This was just a gas station at night. Or so she thought. The low rumble of an approaching police cruiser cut through the silence. She glanced up just as the car slowed down, then veered toward her, its headlights washing over her face. Red and blue lights flickered on. Her brows furrowed. What the hell? The engine idled. The driver's side door creaked open. A white officer in his mid-30s stepped out, adjusting his belt as he did. His uniform was too crisp, his stance too rigid, like he had something to prove. Danielle didn't move. She didn't have to. If there was one thing she had learned over the years, it was that staying still made people show their true colors faster. The officer approached, his face set in a hard expression. "Ma'am, I need to see some ID." No greeting, no explanation. Danielle tilted her head slightly, studying him. "Everything okay, officer?" He didn't answer, just rested his hand on his holster. That's when she felt it, the shift, the unspoken message. She had been in law enforcement long enough to know when a situation wasn't just a routine stop. Danielle let out a slow breath, keeping her voice even. "Is there a reason you're asking for my ID?" The officer's lip curled, like the question annoyed him. "You look suspicious." 2 words, that's all he gave her. Her pulse slowed. Not sped up, slowed. A trained response, calm, measured, controlled. She had been here before, not like this, but close. Danielle didn't flinch, didn't reach for her ID, instead she locked eyes with him. Suspicious how? A flicker of something, irritation, crossed his face. But before he could answer, the gas pump clicked, signaling the tank was full. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he did something that made her stomach tighten. He unclipped the strap on his holster. Not enough to fully draw, but enough to send a message. And suddenly, this wasn't just a gas station stop anymore. But she knew one thing for sure yet. This was about to go very, very wrong. Danielle stayed still. Absolutely still. Years of training told her that any sudden movement could turn an already bad situation into something worse. The officer, his name tag read Henson, kept his hand close to his weapon, studying her like he was trying to decide how far he wanted to push this. "I asked for your ID," he repeated, his tone sharper now. Danielle exhaled through her nose. "And I asked where she replied, voice level. No panic, no fear, just control. That clearly pissed him off. His jaw twitched, his grip tightening on his belt. "Step away from the vehicle," he ordered. Danielle didn't move. She could feel her heartbeat in her fingertips now, not from fear, but from calculated focus. "Officer," she said carefully, "I'm reaching into my back pocket for my badge. I'm FBI. Let's not make this any bigger than it needs to be." For a split second, Henson's face flickered with something unreadable. Then he pulled his gun, just like that. Danielle's breath slowed. She kept her hands exactly where they were, visible, palms facing outward. "Whoa!" Her voice was calm but firm. "Take it easy." Henson smirked, like he was enjoying this. "Yeah, FBI, huh?" he mocked, tilting his head. "And I'm the damn president. Hands where I can see 'em. Danielle clenched her jaw, but still didn't move. This was no longer about a badge. This was about power. And Henson? He was drunk on it. I'm reaching for my badge now, she said slowly. She had to move, but she also had to stay alive. Henson's finger flexed on the trigger, just for a second. She knew that move, knew that split-second decision-making officers made before something became deadly. I said keep your hands up, he shouted. The gun didn't waver. Danielle felt something deep inside her chest tighten. Not fear, not panic, just cold, sharp calculation. She knew exactly what was happening. She had profiled men like Henson before. Men who let authority rot them from the inside out. Men who wanted people to beg, to crumble. But Danielle Carter, she wasn't built for that. Listen to me. Her voice cut through the air, steady, unshaken. I am an FBI agent. My credentials are in my left pocket. I am reaching for them now. She saw it, the flicker of hesitation in his eyes. But before she could move, he did something worse. He laughed, a short, sharp chuckle like this was all some big joke to him. Then, without even glancing at her badge, he grabbed his radio and spoke into it. I got a possible suspect refusing to comply. Backup needed. Now, Danielle's stomach turned. He wasn't just ignoring her credentials. He was escalating. And she knew exactly how this story ended if the wrong officers showed up. But she also knew something else. The second real cops arrived, Henson's little game was about to fall apart, but not before things got a lot worse. Danielle could hear the sirens before she saw the lights. Backup was coming, and she knew better than anyone. This could go one of two ways. Henson, still gripping his gun, kept his eyes locked on her, smirking, waiting. You scared now? He asked, voice dripping with amusement. Danielle didn't answer. She refused to give him what he wanted. Instead, she stayed still, hands raised, the image of forced compliance. Not because she feared him, but because she understood how men like him operated. They wanted power. They needed it. And if you didn't give it to them, they took it. The gas station was still empty. No witnesses, no cameras visible. For the first time that night, a deep, quiet anger settled in her chest. Not fear, not panic, anger, because she had worked too damn hard to get where she was. And now some small-town cop with an ego problem wanted to play a game he wasn't even smart enough to win? No, not tonight. The sirens got louder. Seconds away now, Danielle saw something flicker across Henson's face. Doubt. Like he suddenly realized this might not play out the way he thought. Listen, man, she said, voice even. You really want to do this? You really want to pull some stunt on a federal agent? He blinked, just once. Then he laughed again. Federal agent, he scoffed. Lady, you think flashing some fake badge is going to save you? Danielle didn't move. She didn't need to, because at that exact moment, 2 squad cars came screeching into the lot. Red, blue, white, bright as hell. Showtime. The moment the squad cars stopped, everything changed. The first officer out of the car was Sergeant Collins, a seasoned cop with graying hair and the kind of presence that filled a room. His uniform was slightly worn, his stance firm. This was a man who had seen it all. He barely had time to take in the scene before his eyes landed on Danielle, and then on her badge. The second his gaze registered the gold FBI credentials clipped to her belt, his entire expression shifted. What the hell is going on here? Collins demanded, his voice sharp. Henson, still gripping his gun, hesitated. Danielle saw it. Collins saw it. Everyone saw it. For the first time since this entire mess started, Henson's confidence cracked. Sergeant, Henson started, but Collins cut him off. Lower your damn weapon. Henson didn't move. Danielle watched him carefully. She knew what was happening. Men like Henson never thought they'd get caught. And when they did, they had 2 choices. Admit they were wrong or double down. Henson predictably chose the second. I had reason to believe she was armed and dangerous, he argued. She refused to show ID. Collins scoffed. Armed and dangerous? He gestured to Danielle, who still had her palms up in a textbook, non-threatening stance. She's holding her badge, officer. A badge you should have recognized the second you saw it. The second officer, a younger black cop named Jenkins, stepped closer, his eyes narrowing at Henson. You telling me you pulled a gun on an FBI agent? Jenkins asked, his tone laced with disbelief. Henson's face was turning red now. Danielle could practically see his brain scrambling for an excuse. But there wasn't one. Because the moment backup arrived, this stopped being his story and started being his mistake. Collins took a step forward, crowding Henson's space. "Holster your weapon," he ordered. "Now." Henson's fingers twitched, still clinging to the last shred of authority he had left. "I was just following protocol," he muttered, but his hands were shaking now. Danielle saw it, Collins saw it, everyone saw it, and in that moment it was over. Henson's grip finally loosened. He lowered the gun, but he wasn't ready for what came next, because Collins wasn't done. "You detained an FBI agent, you escalated without cause, and you put a gun in her face when she gave you every chance to de-escalate." Collins turned to Danielle then, giving her a look, an unspoken question. "You want to press charges?" Danielle held Henson's gaze for a long second, and then she smiled. "Oh, absolutely." Henson froze. For the first time that night, he looked scared. "Wait, hold on," he stammered, taking a step back. We don't have to go that far." Danielle didn't say a word. She just watched, calm, collected, in control. Because now, the power had shifted. Collins exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Officer Henson, turn around and place your hands behind your back." Henson whipped his head toward him, panicked now. "This is a mistake," he insisted. "She was acting suspicious. I had every right." "No, you didn't." Collins cut him off, his voice like steel. "You had a choice, and you made the wrong one." Henson's breath came fast now, his face losing color. "Come on, man," he pleaded, voice lower. "Don't do this." But Jenkins was already moving. With one smooth motion, the younger officer grabbed Henson's wrist, twisted his arm behind his back, and snapped the cuffs into place. "You don't just get to violate people's rights," Collins muttered, watching as Jenkins secured the cuffs. Henson gritted his teeth, his entire body stiff with rage. "I was doing my job," he snapped. Collins let out a humorless laugh. "No," he said, "you were playing Danielle finally spoke. "And now," she said, her voice measured, sharp, deliberate, "you get to see what it feels like to be powerless." Henson went quiet. Because now, he understood he wasn't the one holding the gun anymore. The gas station was silent now. Henson stood there, his wrists bound behind his back, his whole body stiff. Danielle took a slow step forward, letting him feel the weight of what just happened. "Funny, isn't it?" she said, tilting her head slightly. "How fast things can change." Henson's jaw clenched, but he said nothing, because now he had nothing left to say. Jenkins gripped his arm, steering him toward the squad car, the same walk he had planned to make Danielle take just minutes ago. Only now it was his turn. Collins sighed and turned back to Danielle. "You good?" he asked. His tone was softer now. Danielle let out a slow breath. "I will be," she answered. And it was the truth. She knew how this worked. Henson would fight this. He'd claim misunderstanding. Maybe even try to flip the story. Men like him always did. But this time, there were witnesses, there were reports, and there was his own damn radio call. Collins nodded, rubbing his temple. "You want to take it from here?" he asked. Danielle gave a small, sharp smile. "Oh, don't worry," she said. "The Bureau will be very interested in this one." Collins let out a low whistle and shook his head. "Yeah, I bet they will." Danielle watched as Jenkins pushed Henson into the back of the squad car, the same seat Henson had expected her to sit in. The irony wasn't lost on her. Not one bit. As the door slammed shut, Danielle finally let herself breathe. Tonight had been bad, but it could have been worse. And as the sirens faded into the night, she made herself one promise. She would make sure Henson never did this to anyone else. Abuse of power isn't just about a badge. It's about the people who think they'll never face consequences. But power is a fragile thing. And when people stand up, when they speak out, the tables turn. Fast. Danielle knew she was lucky. Too many people in her position never get this ending. But this isn't just her story. It's a story that happens every day to people without a badge, without witnesses, without a way out. And that's why it has to stop. If you see abuse of power, call it out. If you see injustice, speak up. Because the moment we stop letting things slide, that's when change happens. And the ones who think they'll never be held accountable, they'll be the ones in cuffs next.